We're looking at three of the most studied disasters in modern history: a luxury liner, a space shuttle, a world war. Now, on the surface, they seem totally disconnected, right? Separated by decades, by technology, by everything. But what if I told you there's a single, powerful, and really dangerous idea that links all of them? Well, we're about to peel back the layers and find out what it is. So, what is that hidden thread? What on earth could possibly connect the sinking of the Titanic way back in 1912, the explosion of the Space Shuttle Challenger in 1986, and the political chaos that paved the way for Adolf Hitler? Believe it or not, the answer is simpler and honestly far more unsettling than you might think. The answer is just one word: ambiguity. It sounds pretty harmless, doesn't it? Simple uncertainty or vagueness. But as we're about to see, ambiguity isn't just a passive thing. Oh no, it is an active, corrosive force that can obscure facts, warp decisions, and ultimately lead to absolute catastrophe. Okay, so how does this actually work in the real world? To really get a handle on it, we're going to use one of these disasters as our guide. Its story is just packed with these hidden lessons that'll give us a framework for understanding the other two. And that story is the Titanic. It's so much more than just a tragedy. The sinking of the unsinkable ship is basically a masterclass in how ambiguity operates. By unpacking the different ways ambiguity plagued its voyage, we can build a model to make sense of our other two disasters. So what exactly is ambiguity? The dictionary definition, a state of doubtful meaning, it just doesn't really do it justice. Think of it less like a simple lack of clarity and more like an environment where multiple and often conflicting interpretations can all exist at the exact same time. It's this space where facts become flexible, and believe me, that's when things get really dangerous. To really break this down, we can think of ambiguity as having three distinct faces. First, you've got confusion. That's the fog of incomplete or just plain wrong information. Second is contradiction, which is when two opposing ideas clash with, well, devastating results. And third, there's cumulation, where myths and grievances just build on each other over time until they become this unstoppable force. So let's start with confusion. This is ambiguity in its most basic form, right? A simple lack of clear, reliable information. It's like this thick fog that prevents people from seeing the reality of their situation until it's way too late. The Titanic story is just riddled with confusion. Even today, there's no single agreed-upon cause of the sinking. Was it the speed, faulty rivets, maybe a fire in the coal bunker? Who knows? On the night of the sinking, eyewitness accounts were all over the place. The first news reports famously claimed the ship was fine, that it was being safely towed to Halifax. And get this, its final resting place was a complete mystery for decades. The wreck was found 15 miles from its last reported distress call. This kind of chaos just paralyzed any chance of an effective response. Now let's jump forward 74 years, from the icy Atlantic all the way to the Florida coast. This exact same fog of confusion was a critical factor in the Challenger disaster. The Rogers Commission, which investigated the whole thing, concluded that the final decision to launch was based on, and this is a direct quote, incomplete and misleading information about the risks of cold on the O-rings. The critical data, the stuff that was screaming danger, it just never made it to the key decision makers. The truth was completely lost in the fog. And this fog of confusion doesn't just cause physical disasters, it can cause political ones too. Just look at post-World War I Germany. The new Weimar Republic was drowning in it. You had this brand new, inexperienced government trying to manage over 40 different political parties. The media was a total storm of propaganda and false accusations. Society was fragmented, with no one sure who to trust or what to believe. And it was into this vacuum of clarity that Adolf Hitler stepped. He didn't offer nuance. He offered simple, brutal answers to a confused and desperate nation. All right, the second phase of ambiguity is contradiction. Now, this is way more potent than simple confusion. This is when two powerful, deeply held, and opposing ideas exist at the same time. It creates a paradox that just has to break. And when it does, the results are often catastrophic. Just look at these three massive contradictions. For the Titanic, it was the promise of an unsinkable ship versus the brutal reality of its sinking on its very first trip. For the Challenger, it was this impossible conflict. On one hand, you had hard engineering data screaming that the O-rings would fail in the cold. On the other hand, you had management and launch pressure pushing to go no matter what. That paradox couldn't hold. And for Germany, it was the Treaty of Versailles, a document that promised peace, but in reality planted the seeds of national humiliation that would spark another world war. In every single case, reality just violently shattered the promise. And finally, we have cumulation. This is maybe the most insidious form of ambiguity. It's what happens when layers of stories, myths, and interpretations build up over time. They create a narrative so dense and so emotionally charged that it becomes its own reality, a truth that's often completely disconnected from what actually happened. The Titanic is practically built from these cumulative myths. You know the stories. The idea that the band played a hymn until the very end, that a strict women and children first rule was followed by everyone, or that the ship was heavily advertised as unsinkable. These are all exaggerations, or in some cases just plain false. Over a century, they've all combined to create this powerful, romantic legend that often hides the much messier, more chaotic truth of what happened that night. And this is where we see how this process can be deliberately weaponized. Adolf Hitler was an absolute master of cumulative ambiguity. He took a series of genuine national grievances from the Treaty of Versailles, losing territory, forced disarmament, crippling reparations, and he just layered them, one on top of the other, exactly like the Titanic myths. He wasn't just listing problems, he was building a narrative of total national humiliation, a story that grew more powerful and more toxic with every single retelling. And you can just hear the power of that cumulative narrative in his own words. This quote from 1923, it's not just a political statement. He's not talking about a treaty anymore. He's talking about a fight against death and devil, a fate that has been planned for us. He transformed politics into an epic existential struggle. And that is the end result of cumulation. Facts get replaced by a myth powerful enough to drive an entire nation to war. So, a sunken ship, an exploded shuttle, and a world war. Why is it so important to understand this ambiguous thread that connects them, especially right now? Well, because the same forces of confusion, contradiction, and cumulation are at play all around us, every single day. If you take one thing away from all this, let it be this. Ambiguity is not neutral. It is the environment where bad things grow. It allows dangerous truths to be hidden away in a fog of confusion. It lets leaders justify terrible decisions by exploiting contradictions. And maybe most dangerously of all, it creates the fertile ground where devastating myths can take root, shaping public opinion and leading people to embrace truly disastrous ideas. So I'll leave you with this question. Look at our world today, in our politics, in our media, in the arguments over science and technology. Where do you see the fog of confusion being used to hide the truth? Where do you see powerful contradictions being exploited? And where do you see these cumulative myths being built to drive us apart? Because recognizing ambiguity, that's the first step to resisting its dangerous power.